now come to the point where the difference between the unit cell and crystal structures. What are the difference between in these two? Okay, I have already made you clear yesterday, but still I would like to read here so that you can have the repetition in your mind. Okay, so the unit cell and the crystal structures are closely related to but distinct concept in the crystallography. Here is a comparison. What is comparison? The unit cell is the smallest repeating unit in a crystal structure's lattice. Okay, when repeating in a three-dimensional space creates the entire crystal structures, which describes the atomic arrangement within a single building block used for calculation of density, packing efficiency, and the other material properties. As I have already told you in last class, that the unit cell means the basic, fundamental, uh, repeating smallest unit, which repeats itself in a fashion in a a different pattern, so that they could make a bulk material. Okay, that's why known as the building block. Okay, so smallest and that repetition of that material, that unit cell, is known as the crystal structures. Okay, so in other words, in other hand, we talk about the crystal structure. It is a three-dimensional arrangement of the atoms, ions, or the molecules. That's very common. Okay, because we have, first of all, the atoms. Okay, and how the atoms and ions or molecules are present in a different way. Okay, and very, at a very kind of single repeating unit is known as the unit cell, and that repetition of molecules and items in that fashion is known as your crystal structure. So the crystal structure is a three-dimensional arrangement of atoms, ions, or molecules in a crystalline materials. Okay, so you could think about, I mean, materials are always a crystalline. No, materials could be the crystalline or could not be crystalline. Okay, so material have the two kinds of the natures. First one is the crystalline, and second one is amorphous. Amorphous, you cannot define the behavior or arrangement or the fashion in which the atoms, ions, or molecules are present in a material. Okay, so that is known as amorphous materials. And the crystalline materials in which you can have the idea how the atoms, molecules, and ions are present in their basic and a very single unit, they are present. I mean, at the very small unit, how the material and atoms are arranged themselves to make the bulk material. So you can only have the idea in which the material in which you have the crystalline natures. Okay, if the material have the amorphous nature, then you cannot define these all things. Okay, so think about it. So amorphous are the different kind of things, and the crystalline are the different. So we are just discussing the things for the crystalline materials. Okay, material are of two kinds: crystalline or amorphous. So amorphous, you cannot have the idea how they are arranged in their atomic level, or you can say at a micro level. But in crystalline, you can have idea how they have formed at a atomic level. Okay, so the ions or the crystalline materials formed by a periodic repetition of a unit cell. Look here. So unit cell is a very basic kind of things who basically define how the atoms, ions, or molecules are present. But repetition of that unit cell in what fashion they have repeated themselves to make the bulk material is known as the crystalline structures. So this is the basic difference. Okay, which describes the overall material structures exactly, because you know the the main dependency of a structure is depend on a unit cell, but how the unit cell have has been repeated themselves to make a bulk material is known as your crystal structures. Okay, what they define, it define the, if you talk about the crystal, I mean, here you can see the units will define the density, packing efficiency, and other kinds of material. But if we talk about the crystal structures, they define the physical properties and chemical properties like the strength, conductivity, optical behavior. These all comes due to the crystal structures. Okay, but if you talk about the density, packing efficiency, these all are the material properties that has been dependent. Okay, that is the main reason, and that depends on only on the unit cell. I mean, what the kind of the unit cell is there. According to that, the density and packing efficiency would depend on that. But we talk about the physical and the chemical properties like the strength, conductivity, optical behavior. These all comes. These all depends on the structures. I mean, the crystal structure, how the unit cell have been repeated themselves in a fashion way that is known as your crystal structures, and that will show the physical and chemical properties of the material. Okay. If we talk about if we take the analogy, what the analogy is there? Unit cell is like just a single tiles in a mosaic. Okay, where the crystal structures like the entire mosaic formed in a repeating tiles. Just I mean, kind of you all have seen the tiles in your room, right? So a single block of your tile is known as your unit cell. But if entire you look at entire room, then that unit that single tile has been arranged in a particular fashion. Okay, to make your all room area in a fashion way, right? That all room tiles look is known as your crystal structures. Okay, this is just a kind of the analogy, right? You can compare, you can just think about it. If the single tile is present, then you can think about the unit cell. But that single tiles is, I mean, whenever you go to the shop, okay, what do you see? I mean, you don't ask your shopkeeper to, spread all the tiles in your room and then you could see how they look like. No, you just compare the one things, one tile of, one block of one, just a single block of the tiles you look, and then you decide, yeah, it's looked good and I will select this. Okay, and that particular thing is like just like a unit cell you have seen and you have an idea how they will look like, and then repetition of that particular that block of the similar you spread in your room, and then you have the complete flooring, right? This is known as the crystal structure. So crystal structure is also dependent on your unit cell. Okay, so crystal structure also depends on unit cell, but the unit cell could have a different fashion in which they have repeated to make a bulk material. Okay, so just think about the the tiles in your room, then you can have the very clear idea. A single tile is in a unit cell, and the repetition of all the tiles in your room, and after comparing your flooring, whatever the your floor look like, that is known as your crystal structures. Okay.